So mind is your aliveness. It's this aliveness force. It's got obviously different parts to it, and it works in a very complex, dynamic way. And I'll make it as simple as I can. But mind is the difference between someone being dead and alive. So the mind is actually about 99% of who we are. So it's huge.
Welcome to the Superhuman Life. I'm your host, Frank Rich, and this is the only podcast in the world dedicated to helping men break free from the shackles of addiction through the power of faith and fitness. It is our goal with every episode to help you take back control and rebuild your body, mind, and spirit. And we do so by bringing you real and raw conversations with people just like you, aiming to find their place in this world while dealing with the everyday struggles and battles that we all face. Now, it is my belief that we were all created for a specific purpose. And if we can harness that belief or faith, then take control of our mind and body or fitness, then we can ultimately create the life that we've always dreamed about, our own superhuman life. I want to let you know how grateful and blessed I am to have you here with me today. Let's get on to today's show.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another amazing episode. A jam-packed episode. I got to tell you guys, today we have a special conversation for you. This is one of those ones that you guys are going to make sure you are sitting down with a pen and paper ready to take some notes. Because wow, is this a PhD level conversation of what? Guys, you know what a fan of the brain, what a fan of neuroscience I am. Obviously, we've had Dr. Trish Lee on here a handful of times. In the work that we're doing over here at Rebuild Recovery is obviously centered a lot around rebuilding and rewiring of the brain. And today we have one of the world's leading experts on neuroplasticity, on cognitive neuroscience, on the mind-brain connection. So I'm not even going to spend a lot of time here on this intro because I want you guys to get into this conversation because there's just so much for you to walk away with, for you to implement into your life, to take back control. You know, we all struggle with, especially right now, this last year plus with COVID, we've all been kind of thrown into a whirlwind, uncontrollable circumstances that we don't really have control. But what we do have control is we have control of our mind and how we process and handle some of these thoughts. So my guest today is Dr. Carolyn Leaf. Dr. Carolyn Leaf is a communication pathologist and cognitive neuroscientist with a master's and PhD in communication pathology, specializing in cognitive and metacognitive neuropsychology. Since the early 1980s, she has researched the mind-brain connection, the nature of mental health, and the formation of memories. She was one of the first in her field to study how the brain can change, which is neuroplasticity, with directed mind input. Guys, that's just a small dose of what she's done. She's written some of the most insightful books on the brain, on our identity, on how to control our thoughts. And her latest book is what we really spend a lot of time unpacking today. So we talked about Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, which is her latest book, which you can find on Amazon or where all books are sold. But guys, this is a conversation where we talk about the difference between mind brain. I think that for a lot of us, these have been terms that we use interchangeably. And she does an incredible job of explaining how they're not the same thing. And we need to really start shifting how we're looking at these. We talk about thoughts and the difference between thoughts and memories and where they come from. We dive a little bit into the spiritual side of things. And this is what I really love about Dr. Caroline's work is when you start to kind of jump into what she's out there is she's not one that is only in the science world. Like, she has integrated scripture into much of her work. So there's definitely a spiritual component. We talk about trauma and how that affects our thoughts and affects our minds. We talk about quantum physics. This was a very insightful conversation for me. So guys, this is one, like I said, there's jam-packed with high-level knowledge, with high-level wisdom, but she does an incredible job of taking these deep concepts and really breaking them down so that people like myself and you who don't hold PhDs can really handle and process a lot of this. So guys, this was one of my favorite conversations to date. It's episode 67. So if you guys are watching there on YouTube, she does a lot of visuals. So for those of you guys who are on the audio side, this may be one worth checking out on the YouTube channel because she has some visuals that she used to kind of help explain some of this when she talks about thoughts and trees and whatnot. So we're going to jump right in, guys. I appreciate you guys so much. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, make sure to follow on Apple or whatever platform you are listening to. And if you find value in this conversation, this is one that you want to share with other people. So without further ado, guys, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess with Dr. Caroline Leaf. Dr. Caroline Leaf, welcome to the Superhuman Life podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this. I love the name of the podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you. Like I told you here, your work has been truly inspirational to me, and it's had a massive influence on my life and what I'm doing, and I've even integrated some of it into the work. So I'm really excited to just kind of dive in. I think
Fantastic.
Yeah, just to kind of give our audience an idea of who you are. So, I mean, you've been, from the research that I've done, you've been studying, the mind-brain connection for really the last 30 plus years. So I think probably the best place to start, because, when you talk mind, when you talk brain, up until really I discovered you, I was somebody that used them interchangeably. And I know so many people do as well. So can we kind of kick it off here today with maybe explaining the difference between the mind and the brain, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
I love that, and that's a really good place to start. And as you're quite right, in this current day, it's sort of on our current times, mind and brain are used interchangeably, and that's incorrect because they are completely different to each other. So I've got lots of models, Frankie. That's okay. I'll use my little props. I've got some for the listeners. I'm holding up a brain and a skull. It's not real. So just in case someone thinks I'm holding up a real brain, I'm holding up a brain and a skull, a model of it. But basically, our brain is our physical, and it's 1% of who we are. So I'm holding up another model of a body, and our brain and our body collectively form about 1% of who we are. So think of the brain as this part of this 1%, and it's the physical. It's what we can see and touch, and so that's kind of easy to understand. So brain is physical, but if you're dead, your brain does nothing. It disintegrates. So does your body. So what is the difference between you and I who are alive, and the listeners and viewers, and a dead person? Mind. So mind is your aliveness. It's this aliveness force. It's got obviously different parts to it, and it works in a very complex, dynamic way. And I'll make it as simple as I can. But mind is the difference between the brain and, if someone being dead and alive. So the mind is actually about 99% of who we are. So it's huge. And if you want to kind of visualize it, I'll hold up this model, and here's your brain and body. Here's the 1%, and the mind is literally like this cloud of energy all around and moving through the body. And we can use physics to try and understand it, and we'll use things like quantum physics, gravitational fields, electromagnetics, work that Einstein's done. All of that is helping us understand this, literally this force that is moving through. Like even in our blood, there's an electrical force moving through our blood. There's an electrical force moving through our mind. Every part of our body, that is mind, because that's not there when you're dead. So when you're alive, it's this force. So mind is then very, very powerful. It's huge. It's 99% of who we are. It drives brain and body. So brain and body are responders. And the mind's always changing. So the brain is always changing. So the brain is neuroplastic. I did some of the first research on neuroplasticity in my field back in the 80s. And that means that the brain can change. So therefore, mind changes the brain, and the brain responds to the mind. So it's a responder. So that's kind of, so mind is all around, this like cloud all around, which we can explain with quantum physics and gravitational fields. And it's nothing weird. The fact that we can sit and not float is because of gravitational fields. Yeah. The fact that we can use this technology to communicate is energy. It's the same kind of energy as what we're talking about around the brain and the body. So the mind is the aliveness, and we can look at it on a philosophical level as our aliveness, and scientifically in that way that I was describing, gravitational fields and so on. And on a psychological level, the mind is how you think and feel and choose. It's those three things. So you're always thinking. When you think, you feel, and when you think and feel, you choose. So think, feel, choose, always happening. And that's mind. And we think, feel, choose through the day and through the night. So your mind is always in action. You wake up with your mind, you go to bed with your mind, you eat with your mind, you exercise with your mind, you have conversations with your mind. You're using your mind now to listen to the podcast. Your mind is what drives your digestive system. So when you're eating, the way that your mind is, the messiness of your mind, with the managed how managed your mind is, influences the effectiveness of your digestion. Your workouts, your mind determines the effectiveness of your workout. If you go and do a workout and you just say, I'm just going to go get it over and done with, you'll lose up to 80% of the benefit of your mind. Of the exercise. That's huge. So yeah, you're working out, but you're so busy, like, I just got to get this over and done with, or you're worrying about something, you're actually losing up to 70 to 80% of the benefit of that workout, because your mind is driving your body, and your mind's a mess, so your body can't respond like it should. Same thing with food. That's how paramount this is. Our mind is driving everything. It's first base. Messy mind, messy life. Unmanaged messy mind, unmanaged messy life. Now, messiness is not a bad thing. To have a messy mind is not the end of the world. What is a problem is if you don't manage it. Messiness is inevitable in life because life is one big experiment. We don't know what's coming up. We can't control people. We can't control events or circumstances. The only thing we actually have agency or control over is our mind, which is our thinking, feeling, and choosing, which leads to our responses. So we've got to train ourselves to be responders and not reactors in absolutely everything. And we kind of got to get away from the current narrative, which is I'll do my workout, I'll do my meditation, I'll do my eat clean food, all of those you must do, and then I'll work on my mind. No, you can't do that. You can't say it's one of the 4 pillars. A lot of people talk about 4 pillars of healing and whatever. I always say, no, I'm sorry, but mind is driving all of that. It's mind and then everything else. Mind is the main thing, and everything grows out of mind. So everything you do, whether it's meditation, whether it's praying, whether it's and all of the above, it's driven by your mind. So mind is huge. And mind is not focused on sufficiently. It's become an area of neglect. It's malleable. It's trainable. It should be trained. Right from very young, we should be teaching our kids how to train their mind. And we should, with that concept in mind, we can dive in deeper, but that's sort of mind-brain connection. So my work has been around understanding what is mind, what is a thought, what are memories. They're not the same thing either. So mind is not the brain. Thoughts are not memories. What are emotions? How does it all work? What is the impact on mind, on brain? If your mind is working around and through our brain and body, what is it doing to the brain and the body? And I gave a couple of examples with exercise and food, but obviously it goes deeper with things like trauma and what we say and do, etc. So yes. I don't know if that makes, if you want to dive in deeper with any of those aspects.
No, there's so much there. And I'm literally looking at my list of kind of topics I wanted to address with you. Just in the first handful of minutes, you touched on every single one of them. So we have a lot to really. So knowing that it's controlling 99% of our waking and not even our waking life, all of our life. It definitely needs to be something that should be at the forefront. And I love that you said prayer and meditation is a component of the mind. So would you say that, coming at it from maybe a spiritual side of things, is the mind, is your work, is this a scientific study of perhaps the soul or the spirit, or are they still kind of separate as well? Because when I hear you talk about it, that it's this force that's inside of us and outside of us, that we can feel it and we can, not see it. There's nothing that we could really see from the mind. So how does that tie into, call it the spirit of the human? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it's totally accurate, your question too. So to understand that your spirit, your mind is basically your spirit and your soul. So, and if you go back to all the original translations of those words and everything, you'll see that they actually, it's mind. So spirit and soul end up being mind. If you go right back to the sort of Greek and ancient Greek and so on. So basically mind is spirit and soul. So spirit, soul, body. So I'm talking about the realm of the spirit and the soul, which is real. It's the invisible, but we're starting to get a little bit of an understanding of the visibility through things like work in quantum physics and electromagnetics and gravitational field work and that kind of stuff. We're starting to see more of that. And gravitational fields are easy to understand because of gravity, we're not floating. So we know that we've got all these gravitational fields around us. And quantum physics, certain physicists have won Nobel Prizes on a couple of years back where they've developed instrumentation to actually start measuring and looking at the gravitational fields. And then that's all got to do with electromagnetics. It's all complex stuff, but we also see that not only are we in them, but we have our own that's unique. You can't have mine, I can't have yours, which is really nice to know. It's really goes to our uniqueness as humans. And we have control over that. We have agency over that. And there's so much hope in understanding mind. If we eliminate mind, which is what we've done over these past 40 years, because I've been in the field for 38 years, and I've watched, as I started as a young scientist and practitioner and so on, clinician, I've watched the trajectory as we've learned more about the brain, which has been a fantastic thing. So and medicine and technology, we've actually gone backwards with our understanding of mind. So the more we've become physically neuroreductionistically or neurobiologically dominant, like focusing on what we can see, touch, hear, and feel, we kind of pushed what we can't see as clearly out of the door. And so the science that dominates, it's not the largest part of science, it's not the oldest part of science, it's very modern science, but it's very dominant in our current age, and it influences education and medicine and philosophy, and it is very neuroreductionistic. So you'll hear people talking about the brain produces the mind, or thoughts come from the brain. They can't, because the brain can't do anything without the mind. If you take the mind away, you're dead. that thing, the brain just does nothing. I can take a dead brain out of your head, out of someone's head, and hold it in my hand. We can stare at it all day. It will never do anything. So, we've got to shift our perspective back to the narrative of humans being having these, being all encompassing, spiritual and body, mind and body. So does that answer your question?
No, it does. Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. So knowing that our mind is really what's, the driving force behind everything. And it is our unique kind of fingerprint of each one of us individually. How much of our mind is, genetically passed down, given to us from birth? And then what percentage of that do we control, and can we change, through the work that you do and all the strategies that you teach?
Okay, excellent question as well. Also very insightful. First of all, let me start with the easy part. We can control everything in terms of our mind. We can't control events and circumstances and people. But when it comes to our mind, our responses, we control that. We have 100% agency. But it's a skill that we need to develop. So you get better and better. It's a lifestyle. It's not something you can just do once. Like the system I've developed called the Neuro Cycle, which is how you actually learn to train yourself to be a self-regulated mind manager. You do that for the rest of your life, because your mind never stops working. So you wouldn't want to just get it in control once and then carry on and fall back into old patterns again. Because an unmanaged mind basically is creating a vulnerable environment in your brain and your body to disease by a factor of 35 to 98%. Now, who wants to live with their body in a constantly vulnerable state? None of us do. So how do you reverse that? You reverse that by managing your mind. So it's 100% in your agency to be able to control your mind. It's a skill that you learn and develop. So you can change your mind anytime, at all times, and continue for the rest of your life. In terms of what comes through the generations, there's the science of epigenetics, which I talk about as well in my work, in my books, which is things that are epi means over and above the gene. So genes also are not what we call self-generating. They can't switch themselves on. You have to switch a gene on. So what switches genes on and off? And genes are switching on and off all day long, 24/7. Because when they switch on and off, they make cells, they make stuff, they make cells, and they make the things inside cells, and they make what we need to keep alive. So that's happening 24/7. We get slow, medium, and long-term genetic activity happening. But it's all driven by your mind, because the minute you're dead, that doesn't happen anymore. So your mind is driving that as well. So some of the work I've done is looking at DNA, and and I put that in the book too, looking at telomeres, which are the ends of chromosomes. Chromosomes are like little X's in the DNA ladder, and the telomeres would be my fingernails. And telomeres are a very strong indicator of how you're managing your mind and your emotions, your thinking, feeling, and choosing. And the more it's managed, the stronger the telomere. Why is that important? Well, telomeres are involved in cell reproduction, and we are making up to 1 million plus cells every second, which is insane. It's an insane amount, probably more. That's just what scientists estimate. So the quality of the cells that we make is determined by our mind. And why is that important? Well, the cells make the body. So if I have mismanaged mind, poor telomeres, I'm going to have my 37 to 100 trillion cells of the brain and the body are not going to be functioning like they could. And then now my whole body's become vulnerable to disease by 75 to 98%. And that's why I talk about in my book about the federal data that was released between 96 and 2014, showing that despite advances in technology and medicine and neuroscience, people are not living longer anymore, which they've done for decades. People are actually dying younger. People are from preventable lifestyle diseases. So people are dying younger from lack of mind management. If you are not managing your mind and your telomeres are shortening, and that's just one aspect. I'm not talking about all those other aspects that happen in your brain and body. If you're living an unmanaged lifestyle, you could have a biological age 30, 40, 50 years older than your actual chronological age, and a sickly version at that. You're vulnerable to everything going around. And if you pair that up with a poor diet and with a poor exercise routine, and a mind that's not driving that properly, I mean, you're just setting yourself up for disaster. And that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing in this day and age. And it's a definite new thing for this generation. It's a 40-year-old kind of phenomenon that is not spoken about much yet, but it's called deaths of despair. People are dying from preventable lifestyle diseases. So that's just one aspect of it. So does that answer your question? I mean, we're going down so many routes here, which is... So you can control it. Oh, sorry, I didn't fully answer. You asked about the coming through the generations. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we do the changes that we make. The way we manage our mind builds thoughts into the brain, and I haven't explained that fully yet, but we can come into that after this question if you'd like. But essentially, whatever your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents have experienced, that forms as a physical structure in your brain and also in your DNA. So it passes through the sperm and the ova to the next generations. So all of us are born with our own uniqueness, our own set of DNA, our own mind, brain thing. But we also have inside of this the DNA that we have the past experiences of going back however many generations, at least 4, probably a lot more than that. But that's over and above what we have as our own unique humanity. So that past does influence who we are. But the good news is it comes through dormant. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen in your life. It just means the potential exists. So you actually have it's like a tree literally in your brain, of proteins that comes through. It looks like a tree with roots and branches. And if you've ever seen me teach, I always use these props. But it comes through sealed up. Like imagine this is in a box or something. So it's in your brain and body, but it's sealed. And you can either activate it through can get activated through nurturing the kind of environment that you grow up in, and you can either live into that and make it part of your life, or you can stop that. You can say, I don't want this, and you can actually eliminate this completely. You can completely take this out and reconceptualize it, which is what the neurocycling process that I teach in the second half of the book basically does. So you can get rid of past generational stuff, and you can get rid of your own toxic traumas, because all of us have trauma of different levels of trauma, but we all suffer trauma, and we've all had trauma, and we all need to deal with trauma.
Yeah, that's great. So I have a background in bodybuilding. I mean, I was a competitive bodybuilder for about a decade. And when you get into a sport like that, you see that certain people are, genetically gifted, and they're going to put on muscle a lot easier. They're going to lose fat a whole lot easier. With what you just said there, with it kind of being passed down, but it's dormant. Does this mean that some of us would have to work harder to manage our mind? Like we're more susceptible to maybe the messy mind. So we have to actually do more of the neurocycling work or be more conscious about controlling, whether it's our thoughts or whatever it is that really controls where our mind goes. Like, is this something where some of us are we're going to have to work harder? And if so, like, is there a way for us to know? Because on the bodybuilding side of things, you know when you really start getting into it, like, am I quick responder? Do I put muscle on you? And then you have the different body types, endomorph, ectomorph, mesomorph. So is it kind of the same thing with our mind? Like, are some of us just going to have to do more work? And then if so, how could we know if that is us?
Excellent question. And I'm glad you made the distinction, because there's obviously every person has their own genetic makeup, which is the physical makeup of a person. And quite rightly so, that's got it's got, mind still drives that, but you've got your own unique genotype, phenotype, etc. And that's where, as you say, some people just have the gene. It's just how their makeup works. So that's on a very physical level. In terms of mind, it's so unique for every person. Every person battles. Not every person admits that they battle. But that's the key issue. And some people definitely have learned to manage their mind. And I say learned, and I underscore and I stress learned, because it's a learned thing. Managing our mind is a skill that you learn. That's why we should be teaching our kids from very, very young. It's like you go to the gym. It's the same principle. We don't apply that same principle in our mind. And it's a lifelong journey. You've never made it. You keep going, but you get better and better all the time. So I showed with my research that neurocycling, managing your mind management through the system of the neurocycle, will improve how you're managing your mind by up to 81%, which is phenomenal. Without drugs, medication, you can really, and it can get more. I mean, that's from scientific research. You can get much, but even 10% would change how you function. So I don't think it's as much as, there will be differences. Some people will definitely, it's very much personality wise, where some people may find it easier to get into it. It depends on you as a person. Every person's context is just so different. Maybe someone's had years of war trauma, and they just really have never been able to, or never been allowed to process it. In our current climate, veterans, for example, that come from a war trauma, the management's been shocking. They just get drugged. So they're never allowed to process anything. You can't keep these. Our brains and body are not wired. And what are these? These are thoughts. These are experiences. So if someone, for example, has experienced whatever you've experienced, every experience that you have becomes a physical structure in your brain. Thoughts are real things that occupy mental real estate. And we are building 8,000 to 10,000 thoughts a day in response to the world, to what we're going through in a day. So that's on every day, but then obviously that then goes from a certain point in the womb to where you're at today. You've been building a lot of these thought trees in your brain. So this is a thought, and each thought is an experience. So this is a toxic tree versus this is a healthy tree, a nice green bushy tree. This would be a healthy thought. This would be a toxic thought. This has got a toxic source. So the roots would be the source. So this would be the abuse or the war trauma, whatever it may be, the experience. Then the tree trunk is your perspective that forms out of that traumatic experience. And the branch, so these are the root memories. So this is the thought, the war trauma. That's the name of the thought. That's one thought, one concept, but it's made of lots of memories. So memories are inside thoughts. So thoughts are made of memories. And the root memories are the source of the whatever happened. So that could be the incident, the multiple incidents of war trauma, which then produce the perspective of this is not... We're not designed to kill each other. It totally distorts perspective, and there's so much conflict that is created. So that then this over here, this part, these memories, the branches are the interpretation, your interpretation of this, just in order to cope. So it's kind of like very distorted. It all becomes very distorted because the whole source is distorted. Versus this one is healthy. It's like, for example, our conversation now, the roots part would be my teaching, everything I'm saying, the questions you're asking, that's the source. So lots of memories here, but this is good. This is a healthy conversation. But these branches over here, everyone's getting the same source memories, but everyone's forming, as they're listening now, are forming their own interpretation of what I'm saying. So how you see this conversation. So your tree looks different to mine, even though you're hearing the same information. So this is healthy, this is toxic. And from day one, we've been experiencing a combination. Now, some of us have had more of this. So if you grew up in a war-torn country, or you grew up where you were constantly physically abused. I just interviewed someone on my podcast the other day who was abused between the ages of 5 and 18. I mean, that's a long time to be sexually abused. So that's a repeated trauma over and over and over again. So and whatever you experience the most, you're going to build bigger trees. So if you imagine that your mind, your non-conscious mind, which is the biggest part of your mind, which operates 24/7, holds all these experiences. And there's a mixture of lots of these, or maybe not as many of these. So someone who's traumatized a lot may have a lot more of these than these. I mean, we've all got a mixture. There's no pattern. There's no one cookie cutter pattern. You, with your unique life story, have a whole mixture of these. And as you go through the rest of your life, you keep making these. You can't not. That's what you do as a human. Your aliveness makes these. And these are taking what you're experiencing and putting these into your brain and your mind and your body, 3 places. So they look like trees in the brain, your experiences. They change the DNA in your body. So they're stored in every cell of your body. So every experience is a tree in your brain with all these memories, plus in the DNA of every cell of your body, plus in the gravitational fields of your mind. So that's why anything that we recall or anything we go through is such a holistic experience. There's all the different elements that are involved in the process. So you can't just push it down and hope it'll go away. It can't, because it's there. It's been established. You have to actually uproot it. Like you would weed a garden. You wouldn't just chop the head of the weed off. You would actually uproot it and you would find the root and you would eliminate it. And that's what you're doing with mind management. Mind management is a process of every single day you are training yourself to work on 2 levels. The one level is the easier level to understand, is looking at the patterns in your life and recognizing, okay, there is this X pattern, and you deal with a lot with addiction. You help people with addiction, and specifically porn addiction. So there's a pattern. So that pattern is telling you something. So the pattern of whatever the addiction is not a brain disease, which is what we've been told today. That's absolutely not even good. It's not science, okay? It's definitely not accurate, and it's definitely caused a problem. It hasn't helped fix the problem. It's made it worse. What addiction is it's a signal of something that hasn't been dealt with yet, or that is being dealt with, and a multiplicity of stuff. So the only way to manage that is to actually find the source. So you have to become a thought detective. You have to learn how to read the signals, and you have to then basically deconstruct and reconstruct through embracing, processing, and reconceptualizing into the healthy version. And so you take the energy from this. Energy is never lost. It's always transferred. So you take the energy from this and you transfer it into this. You build this, which is how you want to operate. So if you look deeply in here, you'll see, I don't know if you can see it, but some of the leaves are dark green and some are light green. So the dark green is the reconceptualized, how you are going to be without the addiction, because you've now found out the addiction actually was a messenger telling you about this. So as you've gone through the process of the Neuro Cycle, which is how you actually do this mind work, you're going to embrace this and reconceptualize it. So you're going to go through the process of finding the root, pulling it out, and then rebuilding it into this. So the green part is how you now want the past to play out into your future. How do you now want to function, now that you know the source of the addiction, how are you going to change that? Because the source is your activator. So how are you going to then manage that? What's your so the dark green leaves are that. The light green is the story, how you got there in the first place. So there's no condemnation in this. It's very freeing and very hopeful, because the way that you show up, addiction and all, is because of a reason. Not that because you're brain disease or you're a bad person. It's because you have suffered in some way, and that was your coping mechanism. And there's a reason for that. So therefore, if you find the reason, you can reconceptualize. But now that takes, for each sort of element, it works in cycles of 3 weeks. So you're not going to do this in one neurocycle, and a neurocycle is 5 steps, and as those 5 steps are 38 years of science. So it's not a quick fix. This is hardcore. When you do this, it's very systematically driving your mind and brain in the direction that is healthy. So in other words, management. The 5 steps are how you manage your mind to change your brain, and to change your body, to drive the neuroplasticity. So you aren't going to just do one cycle. That's not enough. If you see a pattern in your life like addiction, and it's happening and in a repeated fashion, that's your warning signal. You need to land your plane in this forest, and you need to say, okay, I'm going to start doing the work. And you're going to do it daily. So the time sequence, what does the time look like to change behavior, to convert this to this, and to turn that into behavior change in your life? It's cycles of 63 days. And this is the research that I've done, not 21. It doesn't take 21 days to change a behavior or form a habit. It takes at least 63. So it's 3 cycles of 21. So you would work daily for around 15 to 45 minutes if you're working on an addiction. And you would do the 5 steps in that time. And the 5 steps incorporates, it's a system. So you can use whatever techniques you're using. If you're using CBT techniques or ACT or whatever you meditate, whatever you're using, you don't stop using that. You just use it properly in the system so that you actually get it, that it's effective. This makes whatever you're doing effective. It makes therapy effective because it's how your mind drives your brain. So you do it every day for 15 to 45 minutes. Within 21 days, you would have embraced, processed, and reconceptualized. You would have found the root. And once you find the root, this thing, energy transfers, and you would have built this. But it's tiny. In that forest of your non-conscious mind, which operates 24/7, where all these trillions upon trillions of experiences that you've had since a certain time in the womb to the age you're at today, is all this trillions and trillions of trees. There's some little ones, there's some big ones, there's different shape ones, different color ones. Each one is representing that unique story of your life. But the ones, when you just build something new, it's little. And like you have to water a plant to grow, you've got to do the same thing. So to get these things strong enough that they can actually move from the dynamic, powerful, non-conscious mind into the conscious mind takes this thing's going to have enough energy. It's competing against billions of other thoughts, trillions. So if it doesn't have energy, it's just going to get lost, and you're just going to revert back to this. So you have to make sure this doesn't come back, and that takes another 42 days at minimum to do that. And even in that time, you might find, okay, you've just done the first cycle, just got this part. You need to do another 5. There's no cookie cutter. There's no rule. You may do on one for the addiction. You may spend the whole year or 2 years, but eventually you get to the root of all of it. Each step forward is progress, and there's no condemnation in the time that you take, because everyone's journey, we hear this all the time, it's so cliche, but it's so true that your story is so unique that no one can apply a formula and say that's it. So I'm not giving you a formula, I'm giving you a system, and I'm giving you the way that you can manipulate the system literally to make the changes in your mind and brain integrated to the point where they automatize, which means that they are now energized enough that they can actually now produce behavior change. Where then you're in that situation, you get triggered, the trigger comes from the source, you now know what that is, and you can manage it. So instead of reverting to that addictive behavior, which was a pure coping mechanism, you now can move into the new behavior. And that's kind of what the principle is that's operating. I said a lot.
I love that.
Sorry.
I love that. We're all getting, we're getting a PhD level education right now, and we're all, like you said, we're processing it different and getting so much out of it. I mean, just going back to the question that sparked all of that was, are some of us going to have to work harder or do less? And the answer was no. I mean, we need to commit to this mind building, this mind management as a part of our lifestyle. And I love how you brought the addiction part in there. We just talked briefly before recording about some of the work that I was doing, but you articulated it so well. I mean, one of the things that I really try to stress to these is it's not an illness. It's not a sickness. But a lot of my work is built around identity change. And I know you've written an entire book on identity as well. I talk about in order to break free from your addiction to pornography, you must become the man that's no longer addicted to pornography. And that's kind of like a saying that I've really kind of become known for. And it's built into that word become is that identity shift here. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. So
I've even got pictures of that in the book. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but in the book, there's actually brain scans that I've done of when they came into my control group, my experiment as a control or experimental. It's all statistically organized, so they didn't know what group they were in. But they had actually we use QEEG, and you can actually see people's identities shift and change when someone's starting to become who they really are, and in their wide, full of nature, you see the brain shifting into sort of a gray and green color. And it's unique for everyone. Doesn't mean everyone's got the same gray. It's just that's looking at the energetic response, how the brain is responding to the mind. And there's a healthy way that it responds, and there's an unhealthy way. And it's so interesting because the identity, you can actually see people shift. So at the beginning of the study, for example, we had people saying, I am addiction. I am always an addict. I am depression. And then by day 21, they were saying, I'm not an addict. I was addicted because of it was a warning signal of an underlying or a symptom or a coping mechanism of an underlying cause. I have a story. By day 63, the behavior change was happening. They were actually managing, they were no longer being triggered into the addiction. They were actually shifting over or the depression, whatever it was that they were working on. So that's just to say, there's evidence there. That's why I put the clinical trials in, to say that it backs up the work you're doing. It backs up what whoever's working in this field. And it helps you as an individual recognize, hey, this is not just airy-fairy, wellness, waffly, or, to say a scripture, kind of put a band-aid on the wound, use God as a genie stuff. This is serious, hardcore autonomy that we have as humans. We're brilliant. Every person listening here, let me tell you that I know as a scientist that you are absolutely brilliant. But it's a matter of actually harnessing that and using what is you harnessing? It's your mind. Your wise mind needs to manage the messy mind. And that's what we designed to do. That leads to a life of embracing. It doesn't mean you're not going to now have all this everything's happy and wonderful. You're going to have days of depression and sadness and grief and frustration, and that's okay. Own it and then find out why. See, everything you're experiencing, how you show up, there's a reason why you show up like that, and you need to do the work of finding out why, especially if it's becoming a pattern.
I love that, and just to have you here to kind of validate, because I'm not a PhD, I'm not a neuroscientist. A lot of what I built into my curriculum is I've gone through addiction counseling courses and certifications, but it's really been a result of what worked for me and in my life and my journey and what I've been able to piece together by studying people like yourself. And I've integrated so much. I'm a student. I don't know if you can see behind me. There's hundreds of books I've read, and I've been a junkie, and I've just made all of this, and now I get to a point where when I read your work or when I read anything, I now am building kind of a theory about things, and I pull, and everything I do now runs through this kind of theory that I'm building for how things work. With this 63 day cycle, I know you said it's 3 days of, or 3 stages of 21. Let's say we're getting into a cycle here, and on day 22 we stop the work, and maybe we take a couple days break. Do we revert back to day one? Do we lose the progress that was made in the first couple days? Or
no, there's grace there. Obviously, we should never be legalistic about anything. As a scientist, you tend to work around. You look at very specific data points, and that's why what we see is there's this more or less 3 weeks. So as long as you're in that 21, 22, 23 days, and if you leave it a whole 2 weeks, you are going to 3 or 4. I wouldn't go longer than having a gap of 3 or 4 days. That's what I always say. Once it's longer than that, you're going to have lost a little bit of the impetus. You may have to shift back and go back to a certain time point, or even start again and just work through, because you lose a little bit of the flow. So it's in that, it's more or less at the 21, 22, 23 mark, there's a shift, and then days 4 days, 7 day, 14 day, 21 day, 42 day, 63. So those are your kind of main shift areas, give or take a day or two on either side.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it works.
No, that's great. Let's if we can, let's get somewhat practical with people here. We've thrown so much here, and we've gone so many different directions. If we can, I always want to direct everybody to pick up the latest book, cleaning up your mental mess. Pick up all of her books if you're enjoying this conversation. But can I have you maybe break down the 5-step Neuro Cycle, in enough that can articulate and maybe give some people some actionable steps to get started on some of this mind management work?
Oh, absolutely. So what I did in the book is in the second half, the whole of the second half of the book is basically filled with the stuff about the neurocycle. So exactly teach you what it is and how to use it. And there's endless examples. And it's all broken up into how to use it for toxic traumas and acute traumas and big T traumas and small T traumas and toxic habits. And then also building good habits, because you're not just breaking down, you're also building. So there's the whole brain building aspect too. So those are just to give you the big picture overview, because as I explain it now briefly, you can go dive in and really get, and then we've also got a Neuro Cycle app, which literally is me giving you therapy, which also has guides and all kinds of things in it as well. So the two levels
what's the name of the app real quick, and then we'll make sure to...
Neuro Cycle. It's called Neuro Cycle. Yeah, the Neuro Cycle app. So, and it's, so that's it's very organic. So I keep adding new data. It used to be called Switch. So if anyone might know, have done it before, they would have. Okay. But it used to be called Switch, but now it's been switched over to Neurocycle. And it's just, it's actually quite amazing. We've had such fantastic feedback on the first beta, and the Switch was running for over a year. And it's basically me trying to giving you therapy. So it works with the book. I would definitely get both, because when you read, you get one perspective. When you listen, you get another perspective. And then we built guides in. So when I say neurocycle guides, it's like, let's say that you have a moment of imposter syndrome, which is so easy to have in this day and age with the whole, the way we have access to data and social media. And that can really throw you and put your brain in quite a negative state. It really can create a lot of incoherence, a lack of coherence between the two sides of the brain, and it can drop the blood flow in the front of the brain. And that can increase impulsivity and poor decision making. And especially if you're battling with an addiction or something like that, you don't want to get yourself into that state if possible. So in other words, there's so much you can do which we aren't told about, that actually forces the brain to function in a certain way. And then the feedback into the mind is so much easier, because your brain is more resilient. So it's easier then for your wise mind to manage the messy mind. So there's this wonderful feedback loop type situation that happens. Okay, so there's a lot of little techniques and tools and stuff to use within the system that I place into the book. So essentially, the 5-step process was developed in a clinical setting for people with extreme war trauma and clinical issues like Alzheimer's, dementias, learning disabilities, etc., etc. So quite a wide range: autism, war trauma, deep sexual trauma, emotional issues, traumatic brain injury. And I say all that to say that there's a strong history, a scientific and clinical foundation behind the 5 steps. So don't think that 5 steps is your quick fix. Nothing's quick fix when it comes to life and to mind. It's basically the system. I had to develop a system that was simple enough for my patients to be able to process. And what I was discovering in my research is that if you deliberately and intentionally manage your mind through in a very systematic way, which is the neurocycle, you can then direct the neuroplasticity and change your behaviors. And that's what we all essentially want to do. That's mind management in a nutshell. So over the years, I simplified, carried on researching constantly. That's what a scientist should do. And this is the latest version, most updated, clinically trialed version, and the simplest version that I have created thus far. So I created a theory 38 years ago and birthed this thing 38 years ago. And this is the most simple version yet. And it should be. You should get better and better over time. Mm-hmm. So as you do each step, you're doing the most fantastic stuff in your brain. And we won't have time to go into all of that. I'll throw out a few things, but I do give you all that in the book. So there is a lot of images and whatever in the book, and brain scans and that kind of thing to help you, in graphs and things. So essentially, when we talk about managing our mind, the first key issue is that we have to be aware. And we know that on a spiritual level, we're supposed to capture all thoughts. So if we hang around that for a moment, capture all thoughts is a tall order, because on any one day, but from the time you open your eyes till the time you go to sleep, you are building at least 8,000 to 10,000 thoughts. That's huge. And so when I say building, so right now we are building thoughts. I'm also building a thought because I'm having a conversation with you and you giving me new information. Everyone's building a thought. Everyone who's listening and watching. The source, as I already mentioned, is the conversation, what I'm saying, what you're asking me, the back and forth. That's the source in your brain, and the viewers and listeners. And then as you are listening, immediately you're growing the tree trunk and you're growing the branches. Okay, so you're growing everything I'm saying into these little branches, which are protein structures, and my words are little vibrations. This is your interpretation of my words. Okay, so you've always got this 2-part thing. These are all your memories. So you're building 8 to 10,000 of these in any one day. And some of them may have 5 branches, some may have 5,000 branches, some may link up to each other. But every experience from the time you open your eyes, the conversation with your loved one, that breakfast, that workout, that email, that all of that is being built into your brain. But to build that into your brain, you're being informed by existing memories, the trillions and trillions that I spoke about that you've been building from every experience. So the way you are, all your nurturing and your belief systems, that's all in your non-conscious mind in these thoughts with their memories. And as I'm talking now, an example of that is as I'm talking, all kinds of things are popping up into your mind of things you've read and things you've heard and things you've experienced. Those are existing thoughts that are being triggered or to come up or activated to move from the non-conscious into your conscious mind. And that's how you're viewing what I'm saying. That's your interpretation. That's why I'm putting it up here. That's your perspective. So your past informs your present. Now we all understand that now. You've got a little scientific, analogy way of looking at it. Okay,
well, you touched on this all the way at the beginning. I don't want to interrupt you, but when you said thoughts and memories are two different things. So what you're saying here is our memories are driving our thoughts, but our thoughts are then feed the memories. Or no, did I have that?
No, the thought is the tree. So, so let's say that this is an apple tree. It's not an apple tree, but let's say just for the argument's sake, it's an apple tree. So that's the thought, that this is an apple tree. It could be a fir tree. It could be a palm tree. It could be a whatever tree. So a thought is a tree. And like a tree has branches, a thought has memories. So these are the memories. Okay. And those are the root memories, which is the source, the origin story. And today's origin story is me talking about mind and brain. And our conversation. And the branch memories are your interpretation of what I'm saying based on all your previous experience. Okay, so that's what it is. So thought is made of memories like a tree is made of roots and branches.
Got it.
So the thought is the concept. So this would be a healthy thought and this would be a toxic thought. So this would be, let's say that this is some sort of abuse, some sort of trauma. Then the roots would be the experience, the toxic experience or experiences, depending. There could be lots here, maybe a few, whatever. And that tree trunk then is the perspective that is formed just to try and process this. And then the branch memory, so those are root memories in this thought. Thought is abuse, root memories, and then perspective is the toxic perspective that this toxic experience produced. So sexual abuse perspective, I'm worthless. And then in the branches, shame, condemnation, I'm not worthy, I can't form relationships, and all the negative stuff. And then that whole thing shows up in not being able to form a relationship or in an addiction because this is too painful to deal with. So the addiction's used to push it down. So it comes up and the flashbacks come up, I can't deal with the addiction, push it down. So until you see the addiction as the signal, which is what's coming off here, and become a thought detective, you use the signal of addiction, which is telling you a story. So what's the message in the addiction? The message is I've got to look at and here's the 5 steps. I've got to look from the signals to the root. And that's what the Neuro Cycle does. So just before I dive in, and I'll explain that in a moment, you do need to prepare your brain for this work. And that's where things like breathing and meditation would come in. So brain preparation, you'll see I talk about it in the book, and I walk you through brain preparations, 2 to 3 minute brain preparations in the actual app too. Yep. So, and that could be anything. You can do your own. I give you examples. I walk you through, and that could be anything from certain types of breathing, certain types of tapping, prayer, having whatever you want. There's so many different brain preparation things, but it's important to do that because it gets the neurophysiology ready for you kind of priming. If you are, let me think of an example. Let's say that you're going to do a workout because you're into bodybuilding. You actually prepare your body for the workout. So you'll take all the right protein drinks, and there's preparation. You're not just going to go dive in and lift 100 pounds. You're going to prepare, and there's a whole warm up in exercise, etc. That's what this is. It's the warm up. Okay. And then you have afterwards you stretch to cool down after a workout. I mean, I'm a big Orange Theory fan, and you always, and hot yoga, and you always warm up and you cool down. And that's what this is. So you are basically warming up with the brain preparation. And then you come in also, what's very important so once you've done a little bit of breathing or whatever it is, and as I said, there's many options there, you then come in with the right attitude, and your attitude or your mindset around the neurocycle is, this is okay. It's okay to be a mess. I'm a human. I'm having a very normal response to an adverse circumstance. If people are depressed during COVID because they've lost a loved one and they've lost their finances and they're in grief, that's not a brain disease. That's a normal human response to an adverse circumstance. It's been called a brain disease. That's crazy. If a child is beaten up, abused, raped, not had parental love, dumped in a foster system, and they have now got multiple personalities and they've got disassociation. They don't have a brain disease. They are having coping responses to trauma, to adverse circumstances. They're not brain disease. They need help to be able to embrace, process, and reconceptualize. See that? So on a therapeutic level, I used to use it when I was still practicing the Neuro Cycle for that deep stuff and facilitate the process, but also teach my patients how to do it for themselves, because therapy is once or twice a week. You live with your mind 24/7. You go to bed with your mind, you wake up with your mind, you cannot get away from your mind. So you can go on as many holidays as you want, but your mind goes with you. And so you've got to know how to manage your mind in between. So that's what this also comes into. Okay, so you come in with a very accepting, very embracing. So I use the words embrace and gather. So it's all very accepting. So it's okay to feel the addiction. I'm not going to slam myself because of that. It's okay. It's okay. It's fine. There's a reason. I'm showing up with this because there's a reason. And then the guilt. Okay, I feel the guilt, but that guilt is energy. I'm going to make it work for me. It's okay to feel the guilt. What's it prompting me? What's the message? That's the attitude. As opposed to, bad, guilt, shame, condemnation, I must hide. This is bad. It's a brain disease. That's just not going to help you. It's going to keep you completely stuck and going around and around and around and around on the hamster wheel. So that's very important. You come in with that mindset. Then the third thing about sort of approaching this thing, once you've done the brain preparation, and then coming in with this very accepting mindset, is you need to realize that you're a pilot and a co-pilot. And what do I mean by that? You drive your life and you co-pilot your life. So if you're in this little helicopter and it's like a time machine, back to the future, whatever you want to imagine. And I always use time machine concept and flying concept because there's so much in your mind and you fly through your mind so quickly. I mean, those 50,000 thoughts, it's very fast. You like zooming. So that's why flying is a good analogy. And so you're the messy pilot, consciously trying to get through life day to day, all the things that are happening, and it's messy, and that's okay. And your co-pilot's there to help you manage the mess. The problem is that we don't listen to the co-pilot very often. We've got to train ourselves to listen to the co-pilot because the co-pilot's our wise mind. Okay, so we're coming into the situation as a pilot and co-pilot, messy mind, and you're flying over all this huge forest of your non-conscious mind with all these dark trees, big trees, small trees, clusters, etc., etc. So you're coming in like that. So it's very accepting. Immediately, just all of this picture I've painted makes you feel calm, doesn't it? It kind of calms you down. There's no threat involved. There's no time. I have to do this. I've got to do this. I should be doing that. None of that happens here. If you start saying could have, should have, would have, immediately say, oh, okay, what's the message? So anything that is an emotion has a message. Always look for the message. And so that's what you're doing with this. And that shifts your 1,400 neurophysiological responses will start working for you instead of against you, which is quite phenomenal. Okay, so we very quickly, because I've got my next interview in 6 minutes. I didn't realize the time's flying.
We're coming up on it, yeah.
Okay, so very quickly, the Neuro Cycle, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice, so they're going to have to get the book to do it justice.
Yeah, we're gonna get everybody to plug the book. I think we can even probably stop there because I think I have one final thing I want to I want to get out of you. So, so absolutely, yeah. So we're gonna plug the book.
Siri went off. Sorry,
get out of here, Siri.
Disturb on. Oh my gosh, okay. I must have bumped the do not disturb off. Sorry,
it's all good. So yeah, so we're gonna plug your information down there below. I mean, where do you want to direct anybody that's hearing this? Obviously the book, but your website, your online. I know you have a podcast. Like real quick, can
sure.
in 30 seconds.
So the book's available wherever books are sold. It's called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. And then we have a store as well. drleaf.com is my webpage. You can get to the store. I have all my other books and products. My podcast is also called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. I interview some incredible people. I need to interview you too. So then Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. And then I have my Instagram handle and all my social media handles is Dr. Caroline Leaf. So Dr. Caroline Leaf. And there's every day I'm putting up stuff there to help with this concept and lives and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
So that would be.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'll get all that shared. I would love to carry on this conversation, whether get you back on here or I mean, if we want to jump on Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, that would be an absolute honor. So we're definitely going to make that happen. One thing I always like to ask, every single guest, and it's going to take less than 60 seconds here to get this, to get through this. But the title of the show is obviously The Superhuman Life. I mean, it is a result, and it started as a passion project for me because of my own life and because of my own story and transformation. So I lived the first 35 years of my life all on my own, being the pilot. And when I heard you talk about pilot, co-pilot, there's such a spiritual perspective that I looked at that. And it's for me, it was partnering with God in my life and him really me submitting over control to him. So when I talk about living a superhuman life, it's understanding that I do have this body. I was given this physical vessel to experience and operate through the world. And I need to master that. And that's what I've done with the bodybuilding, but it's also been a surrender over to God and letting him kind of take the keys to life. So I always like to get, the guest answer on this is how would you define living a superhuman life?
Well, I just think that the fact that we have this incredible mind is just totally superhuman, and the mind is driving the bodybuilding, the flying, the managing the addiction, everything. So that's our superhuman power, is the ability to, when you understand your mind, you're stepping into that level of superhuman, because it is, and I even talk about superposition in the book, which is a quantum physics principle, but we literally have this, it changes your life when you recognize the power that you have, the agency of what mind is, and the agency of using mind to manage mind. That is very, very superhuman. So when you tune into that co-pilot and you recognize, the principles we've been talking about.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Carolyn Leaf.
Pleasure.
You are a gem to this world. I'm so grateful for you and the work that you do, and for you lending us your time and your knowledge and wisdom here today. This was a masterclass. This is one that I'm going to listen to multiple times. So you guys got it here. You are in control. You are the pilot, working with the co-pilot in your life. So get out there, do your mind management, take control of your thoughts, and live a superhuman life. For Dr. Leaf, Frank Rich, we love you guys, and we'll see you next week.